The bridge of the Human Federation flagship Indomitable hummed with quiet efficiency as Captain Sarah Chun reviewed the morning reports. 3 years had passed since humanity's first contact with the Galactic Council, and the initial wonder had settled into routine diplomatic exchanges and trade negotiations. The galaxy, it seemed, was a remarkably peaceful place where conflicts were resolved through careful mediation and economic pressure rather than violence. Commander Lu Wei approached her station, his expression troubled. "Captain, we're receiving an unusual transmission on the emergency frequencies." Chun looked up from her datapad. "Unusual how?" "It's not coming from any known council member. The signal is heavily degraded, but our xenolinguistics team believes it's a distress call. The transmission is repeating every 37 minutes. The captain's interest sharpened. In their 3 years of galactic citizenship, humanity had never encountered a genuine emergency. The Council's advanced technology and careful governance seemed to prevent most crises before they developed. "Put it through the main speakers." The bridge fell silent as an alien voice filled the air, speaking in a language that sounded like crystalline wind chimes mixed with deep bass notes. The ship's translation matrix worked to decode the meaning, displaying text on the main screen as the voice continued. "This is Architect Zeph High of the ethereal collective vessel Transcendent Light. We are under attack by unknown aggressors. Our colony of New Serenity is being systematically destroyed. All council vessels in the region have been eliminated or have fled. We require immediate military assistance. Our coordinates follow. Please, anyone who receives this message, we are a peaceful people. We have no weapons capable of defending against these attackers." The message repeated, and Chun felt a chill run down her spine. She had read the Council's histories during humanity's integration period. The galaxy had known peace for over 2,000 years, with only minor disputes that were quickly resolved through the Council's sophisticated arbitration systems. The idea of systematic destruction was almost incomprehensible to most galactic civilizations. "Commander Lu, give me a connection to Council Central Command immediately," Chun ordered, "and begin plotting a course to those coordinates." "How far are we from their position?" "Approximately 18 hours at maximum slipspace velocity, Captain." Lieutenant Rodriguez at the communication station looked up. "Captain, I'm having trouble reaching Council Command. There seems to be some kind of interference in the quantum communication network." Chen's frown deepened. The quantum comm network was supposedly unhackable and had never experienced significant interference in recorded history. "Keep trying. And get me Admiral Harrison." Within minutes, the imposing figure of Admiral Marcus Harrison appeared on the main screen via secure channel. His weathered face showed the same concern Chun was feeling. "Sarah, I assume you've received the distress call?" "Yes, sir." "Are we the only ship in range?" "Negative. The entire 7th Fleet is within 6 hours of your position. I've already given orders for them to rendezvous with you." "But, Sarah—" Harrison paused, his expression growing more serious. "We've lost contact with 3 Council Defense Force squadrons that were supposedly responding to this crisis. The last transmission we received mentioned something about incomprehensible weapons and reality distortion effects." Chun exchanged glances with her senior staff. "Sir, what do we know about this ethereal collective? They're not listed in any of our diplomatic databases. That's part of the problem. According to Council records, the ethereal collective is an ancient civilization that predates the current Council by several millennia. They're described as master architects who build impossible structures throughout the galaxy, but they've remained completely isolationist for thousands of years. If they're calling for help, the situation must be desperate beyond anything the galaxy has seen in recorded history." "What are your orders, Admiral?" Harrison was quiet for a long moment. "The Council seems paralyzed by this situation. Their defense force apparently consists mainly of patrol vessels designed for peacekeeping, not warfare. They're requesting that humanity take point on this crisis." He paused again. "Sarah, I want you to understand something. Every other species in the Council comes from what they call garden worlds planets with stable climates, minimal predators, and abundant resources. Their idea of a natural disaster is a crop failure or a mild earthquake. Chen nodded slowly. She had learned during the integration process that Earth was classified as a Class 12 death world, a planet so hostile that the Council's initial survey teams had refused to land without full environmental suits and armed escorts. The classification encompassed everything from Earth's violent weather patterns and geological activity to its incredibly diverse ecosystem of predators and parasites. The point is, Harrison continued, we may be dealing with something that the rest of the galaxy is fundamentally unprepared for. I'm giving you tactical command of the entire response force. Use your judgment, but remember, we're not just representing humanity here. We're probably the galaxy's only hope of dealing with whatever is threatening the ethereal collective. The transmission ended, leaving Chun staring at the tactical display showing the location of New Serenity. She turned to her crew, seeing a mixture of excitement and apprehension on their faces. Commander Liu signaled the fleet. All ships are to prepare for potential combat operations, full weapon diagnostics, and defensive system checks. Captain, Lieutenant Rodriguez interrupted. I'm receiving another transmission from the distress signal coordinates. This one's different. Put it through. This time, the voice was clearly under extreme stress. The translation came through in choppy fragments. They're in the city now. Structures are dissolving. Our people are... The geometry itself is wrong. Reality is breaking down. Please, if anyone can hear this, they consume thought itself. The transmission cut to static. Chun stood slowly, feeling the weight of command settling on her shoulders. In the 3 years since first contact, humanity had been the newcomers, the students learning about galactic civilization. Now it seemed the galaxy needed them to be teachers, or perhaps warriors. All hands, this is the captain, she announced over the ship's intercom. We are responding to a distress call from an alien civilization under attack. This appears to be the first major conflict the galaxy has seen in over 2,000 years. We don't know what we're facing, but we know that peaceful people are dying and calling for our help. She paused, looking around the bridge at her crew, men and women who had grown up on a world that tested every living thing against the edge of survival every single day. We are humans. We are the children of Earth. We have survived ice ages and supervolcanic eruptions. We have endured plagues and predators that would terrify any other species in this galaxy. Today, we're going to show the universe why evolution forged us in fire and why our world tried so hard to kill us. The crew's response was immediate and unanimous. Every person on the bridge straightened, their expressions shifting from concern to grim determination. This was what they had trained for, even if they hadn't known it at the time. 6 hours later, the 7th Fleet had assembled 12 heavy cruisers, 48 destroyers, and 6 massive dreadnoughts, each one bristling with weapons that had been developed during humanity's violent history, and then refined with galactic technology. The fleet represented the most powerful military force assembled in this part of the galaxy in living memory. As they prepared to enter slipspace toward New Serenity, Chun received a final transmission from Council Central Command. The ethereal collective's home system had gone completely silent 3 hours earlier. Long-range sensors detected massive energy signatures unlike anything in Council databases, and space itself seemed to be exhibiting unusual properties in the region. All ships, Chen announced on the fleet command frequency. We are entering unknown territory against an unknown enemy. Maintain combat formation and be prepared for anything. The Indomitable led the fleet into slipspace, carrying the hopes and fears of an entire galaxy toward a battle that would determine whether the age of galactic peace was ending forever. Behind them, on hundreds of council worlds, billions of beings who had never known true conflict waited for news from the Deathworlders who had volunteered to face the darkness. In the depths of space, reality itself seemed to whisper warnings about what awaited them at New Serenity. The universe, it seemed, still had lessons to teach, and humanity was about to learn whether their violent heritage was a curse to overcome or a gift that might save them all. The fleet pressed forward into the unknown, carrying the weight of galactic civilization on their shoulders. Whatever had destroyed the ethereal collective colony was about to meet the children of Earth and discover why some worlds forged their inhabitants in fire. The human Seventh Fleet dropped out of slipspace at the edge of the New Serenity system, and Captain Shin immediately understood why the ethereal collective had called for help. The tactical display showed impossible readings. Space itself appeared to be folded into geometric patterns that made no sense according to any known physics. Captain Lieutenant Martinez at the science station called out, his voice tight with confusion, "I'm reading massive gravitational distortions throughout the inner system, but they're not following standard orbital mechanics. They're geometric, like someone is arranging gravity into artistic patterns." Chun studied the sensor data, feeling a chill of recognition. During humanity's integration with the Galactic Council, she had studied reports about the ethereal collective's architectural abilities. They were said to build structures that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, creating buildings and cities that were works of art on a scale that spanned star systems. "Commander Liu, are you detecting any ships?" "Negative on Council or ethereal vessels, Captain. But they're objects moving through the inner system. The computer can't classify them. They appear to phase in and out of normal space-time." On the main screen, the system's star burned with an unnatural purple light, surrounded by what had once been New Serenity, a planet-sized sculpture of crystalline spires and impossible architecture that had been visible from light years away. Now, the planet was partially dissolved, its beautiful structures melting into chaotic geometry that hurt to look at directly. "Sir," Communications Officer Rodriguez reported, "I'm detecting some kind of transmission from the planet's surface. It's not the distress call. This is something else entirely. Put it through, but keep the volume low. I don't want to risk exposing the crew to anything dangerous." What came through the speakers was unlike anything in Council databases. It wasn't exactly a voice, more like the sound of mathematics itself being spoken, of equations that existed beyond normal dimensions tried to express themselves through crude audio. The ship's translation matrix struggled with the concepts before finally displaying fragments of meaning. Awareness noted. New pattern makers detected. Reality shapers from impossible geometries. Welcome to the lesson. Chun cut the transmission immediately. All ships implement communication blackout protocols. Whatever that was, I don't want it affecting our crews. She was beginning to understand the nature of the threat they faced. The ethereal collective weren't just architects. They were beings who could manipulate the fundamental structure of reality itself. And whatever was attacking them operated on the same level, turning their own impossible abilities against them. "Captain," Martinez called out urgently, "something is emerging from the planet's surface." The main screen zoomed in to show structures rising from New Serenity's crystalline surface, but these weren't buildings. They were geometric forms that seemed to exist in too many dimensions at once, creating visual distortions that made the bridge crew instinctively look away. As they watched, these impossible structures began to move, flowing through space like liquid geometry. "Tactical assessment, Commander Liu." "Unknown, Captain. Our weapons are designed to target matter and energy in normal space-time. These objects appear to exist partially outside conventional physics. However," he paused, studying his readings, "they're definitely affecting normal space around them. If we can target those effects, we might be able to engage them." She nodded, but her mind was racing through the tactical implications. Humanity's advantage had always been adaptation and unconventional thinking. While other species evolved on stable worlds with predictable rules, Earth had constantly challenged its inhabitants with changing conditions and impossible situations. "Signal the fleet. All ships are to maintain current positions and observe." I want full sensor analysis on these entities before we engage. For the next hour, the human fleet watched as the geometric entities spread throughout the new Serenity system, consuming the remaining ethereal structures and converting them into chaotic patterns. The science teams worked frantically to understand what they were seeing. Captain Dr. Sarah Kim, the fleet's chief xenobiologist, appeared on screen from the research vessel Darwin. I've been analyzing the sensor data with my team. These entities aren't exactly alive in any conventional sense, but they're not machines either. They appear to be living mathematical concepts, ideas that have somehow achieved independent existence. Can you be more specific, Doctor? Think of them as viruses that infect reality itself. They consume ordered structures and convert them into chaotic patterns that follow their own alien logic. The ethereal collective's ability to build impossible structures made them perfect targets. The entities can use their own dimensional manipulation abilities as a pathway for infection. Chun felt pieces of the puzzle clicking together. Doctor, what would happen if these entities encountered structures built using normal physics, standard matter, and energy following conventional space-time geometry? Kim was quiet for a moment. Theoretically, they would have trouble interfacing with purely conventional matter. Their infection process seems to require some kind of dimensional complexity to latch onto. Basic three-dimensional structures following normal physics might be, immune isn't the right word, but resistant. Thank you, Doctor. Continue your analysis. Chun turned to her tactical officer. Commander Liu, I want a firing solution on the closest entity. Use conventional kinetic rounds. No energy weapons, no exotic matter, just old-fashioned metal projectiles following basic Newtonian physics. Captain, Martinez interrupted, one of the entities is moving toward us, range decreasing rapidly. On screen, a writhing mass of impossible geometry was flowing through space in their direction, leaving a wake of distorted space-time behind it. As it approached, the bridge crew began to feel disoriented, as if the angles of the room were slightly wrong. All hands, close your eyes and rely on instruments only, Chen ordered. Do not attempt to visually track the target directly. Working purely from sensor data, the Indomitable's main guns fired a spread of tungsten steel projectiles at relativistic velocity. The simple, dense metal rounds struck the entity, and the effect was immediate and dramatic. The geometric form seemed to convulse, its impossible angles collapsing into something approaching normal three-dimensional space. Where the rounds had struck, ordinary matter physics reasserted themselves, creating zones of stability within the chaotic structure. Direct hit, Captain, Liu reported with evident satisfaction. The target is destabilizing. Whatever these things are, they can't handle basic matter interactions. Chen smiled grimly. Signal all ships. We're going to show these entities what happens when they encounter the products of a world that never let its children rely on exotic physics to survive. The 7th Fleet spread into attack formation, their weapons trained on the geometric entities throughout the system. Each ship carried the accumulated weapons technology of a species that had spent millennia finding better ways to throw sharp sticks at each other before graduating to throwing sharp metal at significant fractions of light speed. All ships commence bombardment. Conventional kinetic rounds only. Let's remind the universe that sometimes the simplest solutions are the most effective. Space filled with streams of projectiles as 66 human ships opened fire simultaneously. Tungsten slugs, depleted uranium penetrators, and simple steel rounds crossed the system at velocities that would have impressed humanity's ancestors who first learned to throw rocks at predators. The effect on the geometric entities was catastrophic. Wherever conventional matter struck them, their impossible structures collapsed into normal space-time. They writhed and twisted, tried to adapt to this new threat, but their fundamental nature worked against them. They were beings of complex, multidimensional mathematics, attempting to interact with the universe's simplest and most stubborn realities. Captain, Rodriguez called out. I'm receiving a transmission from the planet's surface. It's the ethereal collective distress signal again, but the voice sounds different. Put it through. This time, the crystalline voice carried notes of wonder and hope. Unknown vessels. We are detecting massive reality stabilization events throughout our system. The chaos forms are being forced back into normal geometric patterns. How is this possible? Shin activated the fleet communication system. This is Captain Sarah Chun of the Human Federation 7th Fleet. We are responding to your distress call. Please maintain shelter while we eliminate the remaining threats. There was a long pause before the response came. Humans? The Deathworld species? But your records indicate you have no dimensional manipulation capabilities, no exotic matter control systems. How can you affect the chaos forms? Sometimes the best way to solve a complex problem is to hit it with something simple and heavy, Chin replied. We specialize in that approach. Over the next 3 hours, the human fleet systematically eliminated the geometric entities throughout the new Serenity system. Each entity that tried to adapt to conventional weapons fire found itself caught in a logical trap. The more they simplified their structure to resist kinetic rounds, the less capable they became of maintaining their reality-distorting abilities. As the last entity collapsed into normal space and was vaporized by concentrated fire, Chun surveyed the tactical display with satisfaction. The system was clear, and space-time was gradually returning to normal geometric patterns. Captain, Martinez reported, I'm detecting movement from the planet's surface. Something is rising from the remaining structures. Chun watched as magnificent crystalline ships emerged from New Serenity's partially restored surface. Vessels that looked like living works of art, their hulls flowing through geometries that should have been impossible, but somehow avoided the chaotic wrongness of the entities they had just fought. This is Architect HFY of the Ethereal Collective, came the transmission. We are deeply grateful for your assistance. In 40,000 years of existence, we have never encountered beings who could combat the chaos forms through such elegant simplicity. Chin smiled. Architect HFY, we're honored to have helped. Are there other colonies under attack? Yes, Captain Chun. The chaos forms have struck 17 of our systems over the past cycle. We had begun to believe that our civilization was ending. But if your methods can be applied elsewhere, we'll need to coordinate with the Galactic Council for a larger response, Chin replied. But we humans have a saying, if something is worth doing, it's worth doing properly. As the combined human and ethereal fleets prepare to move toward the next threatened system, Chin reflected on the strange turn of events. Humanity had entered the galaxy as students, learning about advanced civilizations and exotic technologies. But when reality itself had come under attack, it was their simple, stubborn refusal to overcomplicate things that had saved the day. The universe, it seemed, still had use for beings who believed that the answer to most problems involved applying kinetic energy in the right place at the right time. 3 weeks after the new Serenity engagement, Captain Chin stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching the largest military gathering in galactic history take formation around her ship. The human 7th Fleet had grown into a massive coalition force, including vessels from 12 different council species. But the humans remained the tactical core of the operation. The irony wasn't lost on her. For 40,000 years, the Galactic Council had maintained peace through diplomacy and advanced technology. Now, faced with entities that infected reality itself, they were turning to the one species that had never forgotten how to fight. Captain, Commander Liu reported, the Ethereal Collective Scout ship Harmony of Spheres is requesting permission to come aboard. Architect HFY wants to brief you personally on the situation at the Nexus system. Chin nodded. Grant permission. And, Commander, make sure the environmental systems can handle their atmospheric requirements. 30 minutes later, Chun found herself face-to-face with an Ethereal Collective representative for the first time. Architect HFY was unlike anything in Council databases, a being that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, appearing as a constantly shifting geometric pattern that somehow conveyed a sense of ancient wisdom and desperate hope. Captain Chun, Zephi's voice resonated through dimensional harmonics that the ship's translation systems struggled to process. I must apologize for our earlier hesitation in providing information about the chaos forms. We did not understand that your species' apparent technological limitations were actually a tremendous advantage. No offense taken, Architect. We're used to being underestimated. What can you tell us about the Nexus system? Zephi's form shifted into what Chun had learned was their equivalent of a serious expression. The Nexus is our greatest achievement, a star system where we have woven space-time itself into a work of art spanning 12 planets. It serves as both our cultural center and our most advanced research facility. If it falls to the chaos forms, the ethereal paused, their form flickering through several impossible configurations before stabilizing. Captain, I must share something with you that we have told no other species. The chaos forms are not a natural phenomenon. They're weapons. Chun felt her blood run cold. Weapons? Created by whom? We do not know. Our oldest archives speak of a civilization that existed before our time, before the current galactic order. They called themselves the architects of entropy, and they believed that reality itself was flawed, too ordered, too predictable. They sought to introduce creative chaos into the universe. And you think they created these entities? The chaos forms follow patterns that suggest deliberate design. They do not simply destroy. They convert ordered structures into specific types of chaos, as if following predetermined algorithms. More disturbing, they learn from each encounter. The entities attacking the Nexus system are already showing adaptations based on your kinetic bombardment techniques. Chun absorbed this information, feeling the weight of command pressing down on her shoulders. Architect, we need to understand something. Are these architects of entropy still active? Could this be a coordinated assault rather than random attacks? Zephi's form shifted through several rapid configurations. What Chun had learned was their equivalent of deep concern. We believe so, Captain. The pattern of attacks suggests strategic thinking. They struck our most isolated colonies first, learning our defensive capabilities. Now they're moving toward our core systems in a coordinated advance. Then, we need to assume this is a war, not a rescue operation. Chun activated her communication systems. All fleet commanders report to the Indomitable for tactical briefing in 1 hour. The briefing room had been specially modified to accommodate the various alien physiologies of the Coalition fleet commanders. Chun stood before a diverse assembly of beings from across the galaxy, most of whom had never participated in actual combat operations. Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings, she began, we are facing an enemy that may represent the greatest threat to galactic civilization in recorded history. Based on intelligence from the ethereal collective, we're not dealing with a natural disaster or random attacks. This appears to be a deliberate military campaign by an ancient civilization that wants to restructure reality according to their own vision. Commander Vashti of the Centaurian Defense Corps, a tall, crystalline being with multiple sensory organs, spoke first. Captain Chun, our species has sophisticated defensive technologies, but they all rely on energy manipulation and exotic matter fields. If the enemy can subvert these systems as they did the ethereal structures, that's why we're going to fight this war using simple principles, Chun replied. The enemy's advantage comes from their ability to manipulate complex physics and dimensional structures. Our advantage is that we understand how to apply basic forces in overwhelming quantities. She activated the tactical display, showing the Nexus system in three-dimensional detail. The Ethereal Collective has provided us with detailed maps of the system. 12 planets, each one a masterwork of dimensional architecture, connected by space-time conduits that allow near-instantaneous travel between worlds. Captain Tara of the Avian Consortium, a feathered humanoid with keen predator instincts, studied the display intently. Those conduits could be tactical advantages or death traps, depending on who controls them. Exactly. Intelligence suggests the chaos forms are using the conduit network to spread throughout the system faster then the ethereal defenses can respond. Our primary objective is to sever those connections and force the enemy to fight us in normal space where our conventional weapons are most effective. Chun zoomed in on the central planet of the Nexus system, a world that appeared to be constructed entirely from crystalline structures that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. This is Eternal Apex, the system's capital and the nexus point for all dimensional conduits. If we can secure this world, we can control access to the entire system. Admiral Kethmore of the Aquatic Alliance, speaking through a translation device that converted his sonic communications, raised a concern. Captain, our species' military doctrine emphasizes defensive operations and siege warfare. We have little experience with the rapid assault tactics you seem to be proposing. Chun had anticipated this challenge. The coalition forces represented species that had evolved on stable worlds where conflicts were resolved through patient negotiation or carefully planned defensive actions. Only humanity had the cultural background for the kind of aggressive, adaptive warfare this situation demanded. That's why I'm proposing a division of responsibilities, she continued. Human forces will spearhead the assault on Eternal Apex and other heavily contested areas. Coalition forces will provide support operations, logistics, communications, and securing cleared areas. This plays to each species' strengths while acknowledging our different approaches to conflict resolution. The briefing continued for 3 hours as they worked through the tactical details. The final plan called for a 3-pronged assault on the Nexus system, with human forces leading rapid strikes against Chaos Form concentrations while coalition partners secured supply lines and provided specialized support. As the commanders dispersed to brief their respective crews, Chun noticed that Architect HFY had remained behind. Captain, the ethereal said, I wanted to express something that may be difficult for your species to understand. For 40,000 years, we have existed as creators, building beauty across the galaxy and sharing our art with any who wish to appreciate it. The concept of destroying rather than creating is painful for us to contemplate. Chun considered her response carefully. Architect, one thing humans learned a long time ago is that sometimes you have to destroy something evil to protect something good. We're not asking you to become warriors. We're asking you to help us preserve your civilization and everything you've created. Yes, HFY replied, but there's something else. The chaos forms are not simply destroying our structures. They're converting them into weapons. Our greatest artistic achievements are being turned against other worlds. It is as if someone took your most beautiful music and forced it to become a weapon of torture. The analogy hit Chun harder than she expected. She tried to imagine the horror of seeing human art, their greatest paintings, symphonies, or architectural monuments, twisted into tools of destruction. Then, we'll stop them, she said simply, and when this is over, we'll help you rebuild what was lost. 2 days later, the Coalition fleet dropped out of slipspace at the edge of the Nexus system, and Chun immediately understood why this place was considered the ethereal collective's greatest achievement. 12 worlds hung in space like jewels, each one a unique work of art on a planetary scale. Crystalline spires reached between the planets, creating a 3-dimensional web of impossible beauty that connected the entire system into a single, massive sculpture. But the beauty was being systematically destroyed. Chaos forms flowed through the dimensional conduits like infection spreading through arteries, converting the elegant structures into writhing masses of aggressive geometry. Several of the outer planets were already partially consumed, their artistic perfection replaced by chaotic patterns that hurt to observe directly. All ships, Chun announced on the fleet frequency, remember your briefings. Do not attempt to observe the chaos forms directly through visual sensors. Rely on instrument readings only. Begin the approach to Eternal Apex. Today we're going to teach the universe that sometimes the answer to complexity is simplicity, and the answer to chaos is applied kinetic energy. The largest military fleet in galactic history began its advance toward the heart of the Nexus system, carrying with it the hopes of countless civilizations that had never known war. At its center, a single human captain prepared to demonstrate why her species had earned the right to be called the children of a death world. The final battle for the soul of galactic civilization was about to begin. The battle for eternal apex began with a revelation that changed everything. As the Coalition fleet approached the Nexus system's capital world, Captain Shin received an urgent transmission from the long-range reconnaissance probe Pathfinder. "Captain," Lieutenant Rodriguez reported, his voice tight with disbelief, "the probe has detected artificial structures near eternal apex that don't match ethereal collective architecture. They appear to be ships, massive ones." Chin studied the sensor data flowing across her screens. The objects were clearly artificial constructs, but they defied every principle of known engineering. They existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, shifting between states of matter and energy in patterns that suggested technology far beyond even ethereal collective capabilities. "Architect Zephi," she called to the ethereal representative who had remained aboard the Indomitable as an advisor. "Are these structures familiar to you?" Zephi's geometric form contracted into what Chun had learned was a configuration of extreme distress. "Captain, those are entropy vessels, ships belonging to the architects of entropy themselves. We have not seen their like in 40,000 years. If they have returned." The implications hit Chin immediately. This wasn't just an attack by ancient weapons running on automated systems. The architects of entropy were personally directing the assault on galactic civilization. "All ships, priority alert," Chin announced on the fleet frequency. "We are facing an active, intelligent enemy with technology that predates the Galactic Council. Expect coordinated resistance and adaptive tactics." The response came faster than anyone anticipated. The entropy vessels began moving toward the Coalition fleet, their impossible geometries creating distortion fields that warped space-time around them. As they approached, smaller chaos forms detached from the vessels, like fighters launching from carriers. "Tactical analysis," Chun ordered. Commander Liu studied his instruments with growing concern. "Captain, these vessels are using the same reality manipulation principles as the chaos forms, but on a massive scale. They're creating localized zones where normal physics don't apply. Our kinetic weapons may not be effective against their primary hulls." Chen watched as one of the entropy vessels passed near an ethereal collective defensive platform, causing the crystalline structure to fold in on itself in impossible ways before converting into a writhing mass of chaotic geometry. The platform's defenders simply ceased to exist, not destroyed, but rather edited out of reality. "Captain," Dr. Kim's voice came through from the research vessel Darwin, "I'm detecting massive quantum field fluctuations around those vessels. They're not just manipulating matter and energy, they're altering the fundamental constants of physics in localized regions." Chun felt a moment of despair as she realized the scale of what they faced. How could even humanity's stubborn pragmatism overcome an enemy that could rewrite the laws of physics at will? Then, she remembered something from her childhood on Earth, a lesson about predators and prey that had shaped human evolution for millions of years. The most dangerous predators weren't always the biggest or strongest. They were the ones that could adapt fastest to changing conditions. "All ships, implement scatter formation," she ordered. "We're not going to try to match their technology. We're going to make them adapt to ours." The human fleet spread throughout the system, using the partially corrupted ethereal structures as cover. Instead of engaging the entropy vessels directly, Chen ordered her ships to target the chaos forms they were deploying. The first salvo of kinetic rounds struck the smaller entities with devastating effect. As before, the simple interaction between conventional matter and the chaos forms caused them to collapse into normal space-time. But this time, something unexpected happened. "Captain," Martinez called out excitedly. "When the chaos forms collapse, they're creating feedback through their connection to the entropy vessels. The motherships are having to expend energy to maintain their dimensional manipulation fields." Chen smiled grimly. They're treating their deployed forces as extensions of themselves, which means every chaos form we destroy weakens the main vessels. All ships concentrate fire on the small targets. Let's see how much punishment their reality manipulation systems can absorb. The battle that followed was unlike anything in galactic military history. The Coalition fleet spread throughout the Nexus system, using hit-and-run tactics that would have made their human ancestors proud. Instead of trying to fight the entropy vessels on their terms, they forced the ancient ships to expend enormous amounts of energy, maintaining impossible physics effects while constantly under attack from simple, conventional weapons. The architects of entropy tried to adapt. Chun watched as they began modifying their chaos forms, attempting to make them more resistant to kinetic impact. But every adaptation created new vulnerabilities, and humanity had spent millennia learning to exploit weaknesses in opponents that seemed impossibly superior. Captain, Dr. Kim reported, "I'm observing something fascinating. The entropy vessels appear to have built their entire military doctrine around fighting opponents who rely on exotic physics and dimensional manipulation. They have no effective countermeasures against purely conventional weapons delivered in massive quantities." Shen nodded, understanding. They're like a computer program designed to solve incredibly complex mathematical problems, but they crash when you ask them to add 2 plus 2. Hours into the battle, the tide began to turn. The entropy vessels, their energy reserves depleted by maintaining reality distortion fields under constant attack, began to withdraw toward eternal apex. But Chen wasn't prepared to let them regroup. All ships converging attack on the capital world. Coalition forces begin deployment of the planetary siege packages. What followed was a demonstration of human military engineering that left the coalition partners stunned. The siege packages were simple in concept. Massive railguns deployed from cargo vessels, designed to bombard planetary surfaces with conventional kinetic rounds at significant fractions of light speed. The architects of entropy had transformed Eternal Apex into a fortress of impossible geometry, with defensive structures that existed partially outside normal space-time. But when confronted with thousands of tungsten rounds traveling at relativistic velocities, their exotic defenses proved inadequate. Each impact forced another section of the planet's defenses to collapse back into normal physics. The entropy vessels, trying to maintain their reality manipulation fields while defending against the bombardment, began to lose cohesion. Captain, Architect Zephi observed, "The entropy vessels are transmitting something. Our translation systems are having difficulty with the concepts, but I believe it is confusion. They do not understand how we are achieving these results." Chun activated the fleet communication system and broadcast on all frequencies, including those being used by the entropy vessels. "This is Captain Sarah Chun of the Human Federation, addressing the architects of entropy. You have made one critical error in your calculations." She paused, watching as the largest entropy vessel began to show signs of structural instability under the relentless bombardment. "You assumed that advanced civilizations would always rely on advanced solutions to their problems. You built your entire strategy around corrupting complex systems and turning sophisticated technology against itself. But humans learned something during our evolution that apparently escaped your notice." Another salvo of kinetic rounds struck Eternal Apex, causing massive sections of impossible architecture to collapse into simple, three-dimensional debris. Sometimes the best way to solve a problem is to hit it really hard with something simple and heavy. Sometimes the most elegant solution is just applying enough kinetic energy until the problem goes away. The response came through the quantum communication channels, a transmission from the architects of entropy themselves. The translation was difficult, filled with concepts that human language struggled to express, but the meaning was clear: disbelief, confusion, and for the first time in 40,000 years, fear. They had never encountered a species that could match their reality-manipulating technology with such aggressive simplicity. Every adaptation they attempted was countered by increased application of basic physics principles delivered with the stubborn persistence of a species that had learned to survive on a world that wanted them dead. The final phase of the battle came when the largest entropy vessel, its dimensional manipulation systems failing under the constant barrage, began to collapse into normal space-time. As it did, Chen realized they had an opportunity that might never come again. All ships, concentrate fire on the command vessel. If we can capture their leadership, we might be able to negotiate an end to this conflict. The combined firepower of the coalition fleet focused on the failing entropy vessel, carefully targeting its propulsion systems while avoiding critical areas that might contain crew quarters. It took precise coordination and careful timing, but eventually the massive ship was dead in space, its exotic systems offline, and its crew vulnerable for the first time in millennia. Chun led the boarding party personally, accompanied by a squad of human marines and architect HFY. The interior of the entropy vessel was a maze of impossible geometries that shifted and flowed around them, but the ship's power systems were offline, making the spatial distortions manageable. They found the architects of entropy in what appeared to be a command center that existed in several dimensions simultaneously. The beings themselves were unlike anything in galactic databases, patterns of living mathematics that had achieved independent existence, entities of pure thought, and concept that had transcended physical form millions of years ago. We do not understand. One of the architects communicated through direct quantum interface with their translation systems. Your species shows no evidence of dimensional manipulation capabilities. Your technology is primitive by galactic standards. How have you achieved victory against forces that have shaped reality for eons? Chun looked around at the impossible architecture surrounding them, then at her simple kinetic sidearm and the basic environmental suit that was keeping her alive in the ship's alien atmosphere. Because, she said, we learned a long time ago that when you can't change the rules of the game, you change how the game is played. You tried to fight us using the same strategies that worked against every other species in the galaxy. But we didn't follow your assumptions about how civilized beings should behave in combat. She gestured to architect HFY. The ethereal collective builds beautiful, impossible structures because they can. Other council species develop exotic technologies because they can. But humans learn to work with what we had, not what we wished we had. When you try to corrupt our simple weapons and basic physics, you discover that there's not much you can do to corrupt a chunk of metal moving really fast. The negotiations that followed established the terms for ending the conflict. The architects of entropy agreed to withdraw from Galactic Council space in exchange for being allowed to continue their reality manipulation experiments in the intergalactic void, far from any inhabited systems. As the Coalition fleet helped the ethereal collective begin rebuilding their damaged worlds, Chun received a final communication from the architect of entropy leadership. Captain Chun, we wish to express something that our species has not felt in millions of years. Respect for a worthy opponent. Your people have reminded us that evolution takes many paths, and that sophistication is not always an advantage. The galaxy is fortunate to have guardians who remember the value of simple solutions. Standing on the bridge of the Indomitable as the fleet prepared to return home, Chen watched the ethereal collective ships beginning the long process of restoring the Nexus system's damaged beauty. The crisis was over, but its lessons would reshape galactic civilization for generations to come. Humanity had entered the galaxy as students, eager to learn from advanced civilizations with exotic technologies. But when reality itself came under attack, they had taught the universe an older lesson, that sometimes survival depends not on sophisticated solutions, but on the stubborn determination to keep fighting with whatever tools you have available. The galaxy was safe, protected by beings who had learned their most valuable lessons not from ancient wisdom or advanced technology, but from a dangerous world that had spent millions of years teaching them that the best response to an impossible problem was to hit it harder than anyone thought possible.